The morning sun cast long shadows across Pine Ridge shooting range as Sarah Chun adjusted her worn baseball cap and checked her watch. At 42, she had the quiet confidence of someone who had learned to navigate a world that constantly underestimated her. Her calloused hands spoke of years working as a ranch hand on her family's cattle operation in rural Montana, while her weathered boots told stories of pre-dawn mornings and late-night emergencies with livestock. What most people didn't know about Sarah was that she had been shooting since she was 8 years old, taught by her grandfather who had served as a sniper in the Korean War. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Pine Ridge Annual Precision Shooting Championship was the most prestigious marksmanship competition in the tri-state area, drawing professional shooters, military veterans, and law enforcement officers from across the region. The prize money of $50,000 would be life-changing for Sarah, whose family ranch was struggling under mounting veterinary bills and equipment repairs. More importantly, the winner would earn a spot on the regional Olympic development team, a dream Sarah had harbored since childhood but never dared pursue openly. Sarah had been coming to Pine Ridge for 3 years, quietly observing the competition and learning the nuances of competitive shooting. She practiced religiously on her family's property, setting up targets at various distances and conditions, but had never worked up the courage to enter the official tournament. This year was different. Her younger brother Miguel had been diagnosed with a rare genetic condition requiring expensive treatment, and the family was facing the possibility of selling the ranch that had been in their family for 4 generations. The registration area buzzed with activity as competitors checked in their equipment and reviewed the competition rules. Sarah approached the registration table carrying a simple leather rifle case that had belonged to her grandfather. The case showed its age, with worn edges and faded stitching, a stark contrast to the sleek aluminum cases and high-tech gear bags surrounding her. Behind the registration table sat Beverly Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who had been organizing shooting competitions for over 2 decades. Beverly had seen every type of competitor imaginable, from cocky newcomers to seasoned professionals, but something about the quiet woman with the old rifle case caught her attention. Sarah filled out her registration forms with careful precision, her handwriting neat and deliberate. "First time competing at Pine Ridge?" Beverly asked, noting Sarah's unfamiliarity with the check-in process. "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied softly, sliding her completed paperwork across the table. "I've been watching for a few years, finally decided to give it a try." Beverly glanced at the registration form. Sarah Chun, age 42, occupation listed as ranch hand. No previous competition history, no shooting club affiliations, no sponsor listed. Her emergency contact was Miguel Chen, presumably a family member. Under the section asking about shooting experience, Sarah had simply written recreational hunter. "You know this is a pretty serious competition," Beverly said, not unkindly but with a note of concern. "We get Olympic hopefuls, former military, snipers, people who train full-time. The entry fee is non-refundable." Sarah nodded calmly. "I understand. I've saved up for this." As Beverly processed the registration, she noticed the murmur of conversation from the nearby equipment check area growing louder. 3 men in matching team jackets were examining their rifles and discussing strategy. The leader of the group was Derek Hawthorne, a former Army Ranger who had won the Pine Ridge Championship twice in the past 5 years. At 38, Derek had built a reputation as one of the most technically precise shooters in the region, and he wasn't shy about sharing his expertise with anyone within earshot. "The key to winning here is understanding the wind patterns," Derek was explaining to his teammates, his voice carrying across the registration area. "Most amateurs don't account for the thermal currents that develop around noon. That's when We separate the real shooters from the weekend warriors. Derek's teammates, both competitive shooters in their own right, nodded respectfully. Tom Bradley was a police sniper from Denver with 15 years of experience, while Jack Sullivan owned a high-end sporting goods store and sponsored several local shooting teams. Together, they formed the Apex Precision Team, known throughout the region for their technical excellence and sophisticated equipment. Sarah finished her registration and moved toward the equipment check station, where all firearms had to be inspected for safety and competition compliance. She unzipped her grandfather's leather case, revealing a well-maintained but clearly aged Remington 700 bolt-action rifle. The wood stock showed decades of careful use, with minor dings and scratches that spoke of countless hunting trips and practice sessions. The scope was a fixed-power model from the 1990s, functional but basic compared to the variable power, computer-assisted optics favored by most serious competitors. The equipment inspector, a retired gunsmith named Walt Peterson, handled Sarah's rifle with the respect it deserved. "This is a beautiful piece," he said genuinely, checking the action and examining the barrel. "Your grandfather's?" "Yes, sir. He taught me everything I know about shooting." Walt nodded approvingly. "Good stock work on this. Someone knew what they were doing. It's competition legal, passes all safety checks." He handed Sarah a green tag to attach to her rifle case, indicating official approval. As Sarah was securing the tag, Derek Hawthorne approached the inspection station with his own rifle, a custom-built precision instrument that probably cost more than Sarah's truck. He glanced at Sarah's rifle case and smiled condescendingly. "Vintage equipment, I see," Derek commented, his tone suggesting he found it quaint rather than impressive. "That's quite a traditional setup you have there." Sarah looked up from securing her equipment tag. "It shoots straight." Derek chuckled, not maliciously, but with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the most knowledgeable person in the room. "Oh, I'm sure it does. For hunting deer at 100 yards, that's probably perfect. But competitive precision shooting is a different animal entirely. We're talking about consistent sub-MOA groups at 300 yards, accounting for atmospheric conditions, reading mirage patterns. It's as much science as it is shooting." He gestured toward his own rifle setup. "This is a custom 308 built specifically for long-range precision work. The barrel alone cost more than most people's entire setup. Computer-calculated ballistics, precision-loaded ammunition, environmental monitoring systems." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Every variable is controlled and measured. Sarah listened politely, her expression giving nothing away. She had heard similar speeches before, usually from men who assumed that expensive equipment was the key to accurate shooting. In her experience, the most dangerous shooters were often the quiet ones with well-worn gear who let their targets do the talking. "That's impressive," Sarah said simply, shouldering her rifle case. "Good luck in the competition." As she walked away, Derek turned to his teammates with an amused expression. "Did you see that setup? I appreciate the enthusiasm, but she's going to be in for a rude awakening. This isn't a county fair shooting gallery." Tom Bradley, the police sniper, frowned slightly. "Maybe we shouldn't underestimate people. Some of the best shots I've known used simple equipment." Derek waved dismissively. "Tom, I respect the blue-collar work ethic, but precision shooting at this level requires precision tools. You can't drive nails with a butter knife, and you can't compete at championship level with hunting gear from the 1980s. The conversation was overheard by several other competitors, including Maria Santos, a shooting instructor from Albuquerque, who had been competing for over a decade. Maria had noticed Sarah's quiet demeanor and recognized something in her posture, and the way she handled her rifle that suggested more experience than her paperwork indicated. Derek might be in for a surprise, Maria murmured to her shooting partner, Lisa Wong, a former Marine who now worked as a firearms instructor. That woman moves like someone who spent serious time behind a rifle. Lisa nodded thoughtfully. The quiet ones are always dangerous. Plus, that Remington 700 platform is legendary for a reason. Some of the best military snipers in history used that action. The competition was structured over 2 days, with qualifying rounds on Saturday and finals on Sunday. Competitors would shoot at targets ranging from 100 to 500 yards, with points awarded based on accuracy and consistency. The format was designed to test not just marksmanship, but also the ability to adapt to changing conditions and maintain performance under pressure. Sarah spent the rest of Friday afternoon walking the range, studying the terrain and wind patterns. She noted how the surrounding hills created wind shadows and thermal effects, observing how the flags at different distances moved independently of each other. This was information that couldn't be bought or programmed into a computer. It came from experience and careful observation. That evening, she sat in her motel room cleaning and checking her rifle, a ritual she had performed thousands of times. The familiar motions were meditative, connecting her to memories of her grandfather and the countless hours they had spent together perfecting her technique. She thought about Miguel, currently undergoing treatment 3 states away, and about the ranch that represented 4 generations of her family's dreams and struggles. Meanwhile, at the upscale hotel where the Apex Precision team was staying, Derek was conducting a final equipment check with his teammates. Their room looked like a high-tech laboratory, with computers calculating ballistic data, weather monitoring equipment, and ammunition sorted and labeled with mathematical precision. Tomorrow's forecast shows variable winds starting around 10. "Amen," Derek announced, studying multiple weather apps on his tablet. Humidity will be rising throughout the day, which affects bullet flight characteristics. We need to be ready to adjust our data accordingly. Tom Bradley was making notes in a detailed logbook, recording atmospheric conditions and planned adjustments. Jack Sullivan was organizing their ammunition, each round precisely loaded to their rifle's specific requirements and environmental conditions. "What do you think about the competition this year?" Tom asked, reviewing the competitor list. "I see some familiar names, but also quite a few unknowns." Derek glanced at the list. "The usual suspects will be tough, but manageable. Rodriguez from Texas is solid, and that woman from Portland has been improving. As for the newcomers," he shrugged, "we'll see how they handle the pressure. Precision shooting isn't just about hitting targets on a practice range. When money is on the line and people are watching, that's when you discover who can really shoot." He paused at Sarah's name on the list. "That ranch hand with the antique rifle will probably be eliminated in the first round. I almost feel bad for her. The entry fee for this competition could probably feed her cattle for a month." Jack frowned at Derek's comment. "That seems a bit harsh. We don't know anything about her background." "I know enough," Derek replied confidently. "I've been doing this for 15 years. You can tell a lot about a shooter by their equipment and how they carry themselves. She's probably a decent hunter, might even be good at hitting tin cans at the local range. But competitive precision shooting is entirely different. The pressure, the precision required, the technical knowledge needed, it's not something you can just show up and figure out." Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and light winds, perfect conditions for the opening rounds of competition. Competitors began arriving at the range before dawn, setting up their equipment and conducting final preparations. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation, as shooters who had trained for months prepared to test their skills against the best in the region. Sarah arrived early, driving her weathered pickup truck into the competitors' parking area. She had spent the night studying wind patterns and reviewing her shooting fundamentals, but she felt as prepared as she could be. The weight of her family's financial situation pressed on her shoulders, but she had learned long ago to compartmentalize pressure and focus on the task at hand. The first stage of competition involved shooting at 100-yard targets, seemingly simple but requiring absolute consistency to advance. Each competitor would fire 10 shots, with scoring based on group size and proximity to the bullseye. Only the top 60% of shooters would advance to the longer distances. Derek and his team had arrived even earlier, setting up an elaborate preparation area with meteorological instruments, laptops, and precision loading equipment. They moved with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine, each member knowing their role in the pre-competition routine. Atmospheric pressure is steady. Humidity at 42%, Tom reported, reading from a digital weather station. Wind is currently calm, but expected to pick up around 9:30 based on the forecast models. Derek nodded, making adjustments to his rifle scope based on the environmental data. Every variable was measured and accounted for, every potential advantage maximized through technology and preparation. Other competitors were conducting their own preparation rituals. Maria Santos was doing yoga stretches to maintain physical relaxation, while several military veterans were running through mental visualization exercises. The range buzzed with quiet activity as 68 competitors prepared for the challenge ahead. Sarah's preparation was notably different from most others. She simply removed her rifle from its case, attached her sling, and spent a few minutes checking her natural point of aim at the firing line. She didn't have weather monitoring equipment or ballistic computers, but she watched the grass and trees around the range, reading wind conditions the way her grandfather had taught her decades ago. At precisely 8 a.m., the range master called for the first relay of shooters to take their positions. The competitors were divided into groups of 12, with each relay shooting while others observed and prepared. Sarah was assigned to the third relay, giving her time to watch the first two groups and assess the conditions. The first relay consisted primarily of experienced competitors, including several previous Pine Ridge champions. They moved to their firing positions with practiced efficiency, adjusting their equipment and settling into their shooting positions. The range fell silent except for the distant sound of wind in the trees and the occasional click of rifle bolts. "Relay 1, you may commence firing when ready," announced the rangemaster through a PA system. 10 shots, 10 minutes maximum. The first shots rang out in steady succession, each shooter working at their own pace within the time limit. Through spotting scopes, observers could see tight groups forming on the targets downrange. These were clearly experienced shooters who understood the fundamentals of precision marksmanship. Derek watched from the sidelines, analyzing each competitor's technique and results. "Morrison from Utah is shooting well," he observed to his teammates. "That's a sub-MOA group he's building." Williams from Colorado looks solid too. As the first relay completed their strings of fire, targets were retrieved and scored. The results were posted on a large board visible to all competitors, showing both group size and proximity to the bullseye center. The scoring was unforgiving. Even shots that would be considered excellent for hunting purposes lost points in the precise world of competitive shooting. The second relay took their positions, and Sarah watched carefully as they went through their routines. She noticed that while their equipment was impressive, some of the shooters seemed tense, overthinking their shots and making unnecessary adjustments between rounds. The pressure of competition was already affecting some competitors' performance. When her relay was called to the line, Sarah moved forward with quiet confidence. She took her assigned firing point and began setting up her simple shooting mat and basic equipment. Around her, other competitors were deploying bipods, adjustable stocks, and various precision accessories. Derek happened to be observing from behind the firing line when Sarah took her position. He watched with interest as she settled into what appeared to be a standard prone shooting position, nothing fancy or particularly technical by competitive standards. "This should be interesting," Derek murmured to himself, raising his spotting scope to observe her targets. The rangemaster announced the start of the third relay, and Sarah chambered her first round. She took a deep breath, let half of it out, and settled into her natural point of aim. Her grandfather's voice echoed. In her memory, "Don't think so much, Sarah. Trust your fundamentals. The rifle knows where to shoot. Just let it happen." Her first shot broke cleanly, and through the spotting scopes, observers could see a clean hole appear in the 10 ring of her target. Derek raised his eyebrows slightly. "Lucky shot," he concluded. "Let's see if she can repeat it." Sarah worked through her 10-shot string methodically, her pace steady and unhurried. She didn't have a shooting coach calling wind conditions or a spotter providing feedback. She simply trusted her training and experience, reading the conditions herself, and making instinctive adjustments based on decades of practice. When the relay was complete and targets were retrieved, a murmur went through the crowd of observers. Sarah's target showed a group that would have been impressive from any competitor, regardless of their equipment or experience level. All 10 shots were within the 9 and 10 rings, with 7 of them clustered tightly in the X-ring at the center of the bullseye. Derek studied the target board with a frown. "That's actually pretty good," he admitted grudgingly. "Must be beginners. Luck. Wait until we get to the longer distances where the real skill shows." Maria Santos, who had been watching Sarah throughout the relay, smiled knowingly. "That wasn't luck," she told Lisa Wong. "Did you see her breathing pattern? Her follow-through? That woman has been shooting seriously for a long time." The morning continued with the remaining relays, and by noon, the field had been narrowed to 42 competitors who had advanced to the 200-yard stage. Sarah's name appeared in the upper third of the rankings, a result that surprised many observers, but not Sarah herself. She had shot within her capabilities and knew she was just getting started. During the lunch break, competitors gathered in small groups to discuss the morning's results and prepare for the afternoon's longer distance challenges. Derek and his team huddled around their laptop, analyzing wind data and ballistic calculations for the 200-yard stage. "The wind has picked up as predicted," Tom observed, studying their instruments. "We're seeing consistent 3 to 4 mph. From the northwest, with occasional gusts to 6 mph. That's manageable if we stay on top of our wind calls." Derek nodded, but his attention kept drifting to Sarah, who was sitting alone under a tree, eating a simple sandwich and watching the wind flags downrange. She wasn't consulting computers or weather instruments, just observing and thinking. "I still can't figure out how she shot that group this morning," Derek said finally. "That rifle and scope combination shouldn't be capable of that level of precision." Jack Sullivan had been thinking the same thing. "Maybe the equipment isn't as important as we think. My grandfather used to tell stories about Korean War snipers who could outshoot anyone with basic rifles and iron sights." "That was different," Derek insisted. "Combat shooting versus precision competition are completely different disciplines. And the equipment has evolved for good reasons. You can't compete with modern precision rifles using technology from the Cold War." As the afternoon session began, the 200-yard targets were set up and competitors prepared for the next challenge. The increased distance would amplify any flaws in technique or equipment, separating the truly skilled shooters from those who had succeeded on luck or favorable conditions. Sarah approached the firing line for her relay with the same quiet confidence. She had shown all day. The wind had indeed picked up, creating more challenging conditions that would test every competitor's ability to read and compensate for environmental factors. This time, Derek positioned himself directly behind Sarah's firing point, determined to understand how she was achieving her results. He watched as she went through her pre-shot routine, which appeared remarkably simple compared to the elaborate processes employed by most competitive shooters. "She's not even using a wind meter," Derek observed to Tom, who had joined him as a spotter. "How can she possibly make accurate wind calls without data?" Tom, drawing on his law enforcement sniper experience, watched Sarah's technique with professional interest. She's reading the wind the old-fashioned way. Look at how she's watching the mirage patterns and the vegetation downrange. Some of the best military snipers I've worked with can read conditions better by observation than we can with instruments. When Sarah's relay began firing, Derek paid close attention to her shot timing. He noticed that she wasn't shooting at regular intervals like most competitors, but instead waiting for lulls in the wind condition, firing her shots when the environmental factors were most favorable. She's timing her shots to the wind, Tom realized. That's actually pretty sophisticated. She's waiting for her shooting window instead of trying to calculate hold-offs. Shot after shot, Sarah continued to build another impressive group on her target. Her technique remained consistent, her breathing steady, and her follow-through precise. By the end of her string, she had once again posted a score that placed her among the top performers of the day. When the 200-yard results were posted, Sarah's name had moved up several positions in the overall standings. She was now ranked 8th out of 42 remaining competitors, ahead of several shooters with extensive competition experience and expensive equipment. Derek studied the results board with growing bewilderment. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "She's outshoot guys with decades of experience and equipment worth more than her truck." The final stage of Saturday's competition was the 300-yard distance, traditionally where the field separated into clear divisions between the elite performers and the rest of the competitors. At this range, minor flaws in technique, equipment, or environmental reading were magnified significantly. As competitors prepared for the final relay of the day, Derek made a decision that would later prove significant. He approached Sarah as she was checking her rifle before the 300-yard stage. "Excuse me," Derek said, his tone attempting to be friendly but carrying an undertone of condescension. "I've been watching your shooting today, and I have to say, you're doing better than I expected." Sarah looked up from her rifle, her expression neutral. "Thank you." "I was wondering," Derek continued, "have you considered upgrading your equipment? I mean, you're obviously a decent shot, but you're really handicapping yourself with that old setup. With proper gear, you might actually be competitive." Sarah set down her cleaning rod and looked at Derek directly. "My rifle shoots fine." "I'm sure it does for what it is," Derek persisted. "But competitive precision shooting is about maximizing every advantage. That scope, for instance, it's probably not even capable of the resolution needed for serious long-range work. And your stock, it's not adjustable for proper fit. You're basically trying to thread a needle while wearing mittens." A few other competitors had begun listening to the conversation, including Maria Santos, who was growing increasingly annoyed with Derek's condescending attitude. "Maybe," Derek continued, warming to his subject, "after today's competition, you might want to consider taking some classes, learning about modern shooting techniques. There are schools that teach proper long-range methodology, ballistic calculation, equipment selection. I could recommend some good programs for beginners." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained calm. "I appreciate the advice." Derek, misinterpreting her response as gratitude, pressed on. "Don't get me wrong. I respect the enthusiasm. But there's a right way and a wrong way to hold a rifle for precision work. Your grip, your cheek weld, your breathing technique, they're all pretty basic. Against recreational shooters, that might work fine. But at this level of competition, proper form is everything." He gestured toward his own rifle setup. "See, this stock is adjustable for length of pull, comb height, and cant. The grip is precisely angled for optimal hand position. The trigger is set to exactly 2 pounds with 0 creep. Every component is optimized for consistent, repeatable performance." Maria Santos had heard enough. "Derek," she interjected, "maybe you should focus on your own shooting and let others worry about theirs." Derek turned to Maria with a surprised expression. "I'm just trying to be helpful." This lady obviously has some natural ability, but she's working with equipment that belongs in a museum. With proper gear and training, she might actually have potential. Her equipment seems to be working just fine, Maria replied coolly. Maybe the issue isn't what she's using, but how well she knows how to use it. Derek chuckled dismissively. Maria, come on. You know as well as I do that precision shooting at championship level requires precision tools. You can't compete with a Yugo against Formula One cars, no matter how good the driver is. Sarah had listened to this exchange in silence, but something in Derek's tone and assumptions had struck a nerve. She stood up slowly, shouldering her rifle case. You're probably right, she said quietly. I guess we'll find out soon enough. As she walked toward the 300-yard firing line, Derek turned to his teammates with a satisfied expression. At least, she's realistic about her limitations. Maybe this will be a learning experience for her. Tom Bradley shook his head. Derek, sometimes you can be a real ass. That woman hasn't done anything to deserve your condescension. I'm not being condescending, Derek protested. I'm being realistic. This is a serious competition with serious money on the line. She's going to get embarrassed out there, and it's not going to be pretty to watch. The 300-yard stage represented the culmination of Saturday's competition, with only the top 25 shooters advancing to Sunday's final rounds at longer distances. The pressure was palpable as competitors took their positions, knowing that this was where dreams would either continue or end. Sarah was assigned to the final relay of the day, which meant shooting in the most challenging conditions as afternoon. Winds typically picked up. She took her position on the firing line and began her setup routine, seemingly oblivious to the observers who had gathered to watch her performance. Derek positioned himself with his spotting scope directly behind her firing point, determined to document her inevitable failure at the increased distance. Several other competitors and spectators had also gathered, curious to see how the quiet woman with the vintage rifle would handle the most demanding test of the day. Wind's really picking up now, Tom observed, watching the flags downrange dance in the gusting breeze. This is going to be tough for everyone. Derek nodded, focusing his spotting scope on Sarah's target. This is where the separation happens. At 300 yards in these conditions, there's no room for error. Equipment limitations and technique flaws had exposed pretty quickly. The rangemaster called for the final relay to begin, and Sarah chambered her first round. She settled into her shooting position with the same methodical precision she had shown all day, taking time to establish her natural point of aim and breathing pattern. What happened next would be talked about at Pine Ridge for years to come. Sarah's first shot broke cleanly, and through the spotting scopes, observers watched a perfect bullet hole appear in the 10 ring of her target. Her second shot followed, striking within an inch of the first, then a third, equally precise. She's building a really tight group, Tom murmured, surprise evident in his voice. Derek adjusted his spotting scope, checking to make sure he was observing the correct target. That can't be right. The wind conditions should be throwing shots all over the place. But Sarah continued her steady progress through her 10-shot string, each round finding its mark with mechanical precision. She wasn't hurrying or struggling with the conditions. She was simply executing each shot with the confidence of someone who had done this thousands of times before. By her 7th shot, a crowd had gathered behind the firing line. Word was spreading through the competition that something remarkable was happening on Relay 4, Lane 12. Experienced shooters were abandoning their own preparations to watch through spotting scopes and binoculars. I've never seen anything like this, whispered Maria Santos, watching through her scope. She's shooting a group that would be impressive in perfect conditions, and she's doing it in gusty winds at 300 yards. Derek's confidence was beginning to waver as he watched shot after shot land in the center of Sarah's target. She must be getting lucky with the wind, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. No one shoots groups like that without proper equipment and environmental data. Sarah's final 3 shots continued the pattern of precision that had characterized her entire string. When she fired her 10th and final round, the range fell silent as everyone waited for the targets to be retrieved and scored. The scoring process seemed to take forever, but when Sarah's target was finally posted on the results board, a collective gasp went up from the assembled competitors and spectators. Not only had she fired the best group of the day, but all 10 of her shots were contained within a circle smaller than most competitors achieved with 5 shots. Derek stared at the target in disbelief. That's impossible. That rifle and scope combination can't shoot groups like that. There has to be some kind of mistake. But there was no mistake. Sarah had just posted one of the best 300-yard precision shooting performances in Pine Ridge competition history, using equipment that most competitors would consider inadequate for serious long-range work. As competitors gathered around the results board, studying the day's rankings, Sarah quietly packed her equipment and prepared to leave. She had accomplished her goal of advancing to Sunday's finals, but more importantly, she had proven to herself that her skills were competitive at the highest level. Derek approached her as she was loading her rifle case into her truck. His earlier condescension had been replaced by confusion and grudging respect. "I have to ask," Derek said, his tone much more humble than it had been earlier. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Sarah paused in loading her equipment and looked at Derek directly. "My grandfather taught me when I was 8 years old. We practiced every day for 10 years until he passed away. After that, I kept practicing on my own. But the conditions today, the wind, the distance, how did you make those shots without proper equipment?" Sarah closed her truck's tailgate and faced Derek. "My grandfather used to say that the most important equipment is between your ears. He taught me to read wind by watching grass and trees, to understand how bullets fly by watching thousands of them hit targets. All that computer stuff might be helpful, but it doesn't replace understanding your rifle and knowing how to shoot." She climbed into her truck and started the engine. "See you tomorrow for the finals." As Sarah drove away, Derek stood in the parking lot with his teammates, trying to process what he had witnessed. Everything he thought he knew about competitive precision shooting had been challenged by a quiet ranch hand with a rifle older than some of the competitors. "Maybe," Tom said thoughtfully, "we've been overthinking this whole thing. Maybe the fundamentals matter more than we realized." Derek didn't respond, but he was already mentally reviewing every assumption he had made about equipment, technique, and what it took to win at the highest levels of precision shooting competition. Tomorrow's finals were going to be very interesting indeed. Sunday morning arrived with overcast skies and a steady crosswind that had every competitor on edge. The Pine Ridge finals would test shooters at distances ranging from 400 to 600 yards. Conditions that would challenge even the most experienced marksmen. Sarah arrived at the range 2 hours before the scheduled start time, wanting to study the wind patterns and get a feel for how the changing weather might affect bullet flight at the extreme distances. The parking lot was already bustling with activity as competitors unloaded increasingly sophisticated equipment. Mobile weather stations, laptop computers running ballistic software, and precision ammunition sorted by lot numbers created an atmosphere more reminiscent of a scientific expedition than a shooting competition. Sarah's simple approach stood out even more starkly against this backdrop of technological sophistication. Derek Hawthorne and his Apex Precision team had established what looked like a command center near their vehicles. Multiple weather monitoring devices provided real-time atmospheric data, while computers calculated firing solutions for every possible condition they might encounter. The team moved with military precision, each member responsible for specific aspects of their preparation protocol. "Barometric pressure is dropping," Tom Bradley announced, reading from a digital weather station. That's going to affect trajectory calculations at longer distances. We need to adjust our ballistic data accordingly. Derek nodded grimly as he reviewed the updated calculations on his laptop screen. Yesterday's results had shaken his confidence, more than he cared to admit. Sarah Chun's performance with obsolete equipment had forced him to question assumptions he had held for years about what was required to compete at championship level. "Have you seen the woman with the old Remington this morning?" Jack Sullivan asked, scanning the competitor area with binoculars. Derek spotted Sarah near the 400-yard line, standing quietly and observing the wind flags at various distances. She wasn't consulting instruments or taking notes. She was simply watching and thinking, the way a predator studies its environment before hunting. "She's probably in over her head now," Derek said, but his tone lacked the certainty it had carried the previous day. Yesterday was impressive, but 400 to 600 yards in these conditions is where real precision shooting happens. That's where equipment limitations become impossible to overcome. Maria Santos was conducting her own preparation routine nearby, overhearing Derek's comment. She had spent considerable time the previous evening thinking about Sarah's performance and Derek's reaction to it. As a shooting instructor with 15 years of experience, Maria had seen many talented shooters overlooked or dismissed because they didn't fit conventional expectations. "You know," Maria said, approaching Derek's setup, "some of the best shooters I've ever known were the quiet ones who didn't talk much about their equipment or technique. They just showed up and hit what they aimed at." Derek looked up from his computer calculations. "Maria, I respect natural talent, but at these distances, physics takes over. Bullet drop, wind drift, atmospheric effects, they all become exponentially more challenging. You need precise data and equipment capable of delivering repeatable results." "Maybe," Maria replied thoughtfully. "Or maybe you need someone who understands those physics so well, they don't need a computer to calculate them." The conversation was interrupted by an announcement from the range. Master calling for competitor check-in and final equipment inspection. The field had been narrowed to 25 shooters, representing the best precision marksmen in the tri-state region. Among them were several former military snipers, law enforcement precision shooters, and competitive marksmen who traveled the national circuit. Sarah approached the check-in table carrying the same worn leather rifle case she had used the previous day. Beverly Morrison, who had processed her initial registration, looked up with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "I have to say, yesterday was quite a performance," Beverly commented as she verified Sarah's competitor credentials. "A lot of people are talking about your shooting." Sarah nodded politely. "Just trying to do my best." "Are you feeling confident about today's longer distances?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "The fundamentals don't change whether you're shooting 100 yards or 600. If you understand your rifle and can read the conditions, distance is just mathematics." Beverly stamped Sarah's competitor card and handed it back. "Well, good luck out there. You've certainly earned your place in these finals." As Sarah moved toward the equipment inspection area, she became aware of the increased attention focused on her. Conversations quieted when she passed, and she could feel the weight of curious stares from competitors and spectators alike. The anonymity she had enjoyed the previous day was gone, replaced by expectations and scrutiny that felt heavier than her rifle case. Walt Peterson, the equipment inspector, greeted Sarah with genuine warmth. "Back for another day with that beautiful Remington. How's it shooting for you?" "It's doing what I ask of it," Sarah replied, opening her case for the mandatory safety inspection. Walt examined the rifle with the same care he had shown the previous day, but this time his inspection was more thorough. Word of Sarah's performance had spread, and there were whispers about whether her equipment might have modifications that gave her an unfair advantage. "Stock rifle, standard scope, no modifications," Walt announced loudly enough for nearby competitors to hear. Everything's completely legal and regulation compliant. Derek had positioned himself where he could observe the inspection process, still trying to understand how Sarah had achieved her results. When Walt confirmed that her equipment was entirely standard, Derek frowned deeply. "There has to be something," he muttered to Tom. "Hand-loaded ammunition, modified trigger, something that explains yesterday's performance." Tom Bradley, who had been thinking about the previous day's events, offered a different perspective. "Maybe the explanation is simpler than we think. Maybe she's just really good at shooting." The first stage of Sunday's competition would be conducted at 400 yards, a distance where environmental factors began to have significant impact on bullet trajectory. The wind had picked up overnight, creating challenging conditions that would test every aspect of a shooter's skill and equipment. Competition format for the finals was more demanding than the previous day's qualifying rounds. Each shooter would fire 2 strings of 10 shots, with scoring based on both accuracy and consistency. Only the top 15 would advance to the 500-yard stage, and ultimately just 8 finalists would compete at 600 yards for the championship. Sarah was assigned to the second relay, giving her an opportunity to observe the first group of shooters and assess how the conditions were affecting bullet flight. She watched as experienced competitors struggled with wind calls, some shots drifting wide despite obviously correct sight pictures and trigger control. The first relay included Derek and his Apex Precision teammates, all of whom approached the firing line with their usual methodical preparation. Derek's equipment setup took nearly 10 minutes as he adjusted his rifle's stock scope settings and checked his ballistic calculations one final time. Wind is variable from northwest at 5 to 8 miles per hour, Tom called from his spotting position behind Derek. Temperature is 58 degrees, humidity at 65%. Your ballistic solution shows 2.1 mils elevation, 0.6 mils left for wind. Derek nodded and settled into his shooting position, his custom rifle supported by a precision bipod and rear bag. The first shot of his string broke cleanly, and Tom immediately called the impact through his spotting scope. "Hit, 9 ring at 11 o'clock. Adjust wind call by 0.2 mils right." Derek made the adjustment and fired his second shot, which impacted closer to center. He continued through his string methodically, making small adjustments based on Tom's spotting and their real-time wind calculations. It was textbook precision shooting, technically correct and professionally executed. When Derek's target was scored, he had posted a respectable group that placed him in the upper third of the first relay. Not his best performance, but solid shooting that demonstrated his technical competence and equipment mastery. Jack Sullivan and the other members of Derek's team performed similarly, posting good scores that reflected their training and preparation. However, none of them achieved the exceptional results that would be needed to win the championship. As the second relay was called to the firing line, Derek positioned himself to observe Sarah's shooting with intense interest. He had studied video footage of her technique from the previous day, trying to identify flaws or inconsistencies that might explain her performance. "Watch her wind calls," Derek instructed Tom, who was serving as his spotter for observation purposes. "I want to understand how she's reading these conditions without instruments." Sarah took her position on the firing line with the same quiet confidence she had displayed throughout the competition. Her setup routine was notably faster than most competitors, requiring less than 3 minutes to establish her shooting position and sight picture. Unlike Derek's high-tech approach, Sarah didn't have a spotter calling wind conditions or feeding her ballistic data. She observed the wind flags and vegetation herself, making mental calculations based on experience rather than computer algorithms. Her first shot at 400 yards broke with the same clean precision that had characterized her previous day's performance. Through spotting scopes, observers watched the bullet impact in the 10 ring, slightly left of center. "Good shot," Tom murmured, watching through Derek's spotting scope, She's reading the wind correctly. Sarah's second shot followed quickly, impacting within inches of her first. Unlike many competitors who spent significant time between shots, consulting data and making adjustments, Sarah seemed to trust her initial wind call and shot timing. She's not making any scope adjustments, Derek observed with growing confusion. How can she maintain that level of accuracy without compensating for changing conditions? The answer became apparent as Sarah continued through her string. Rather than trying to force shots in unfavorable conditions, she was timing her shots to natural lulls in the wind pattern. When conditions weren't optimal, she waited. When they stabilized, she fired immediately. She's hunting her shots, Tom realized, referring to the technique of waiting for ideal firing windows rather than shooting at regular intervals. That's actually more sophisticated than what most of us are doing. By the time Sarah completed her first 10-shot string, she had posted another exceptional group that placed her at the top of the leaderboard. More importantly, her consistency suggested that yesterday's performance had not been a fluke but rather a demonstration of genuine skill. Derek stared at the target board in mounting frustration. This doesn't make sense. She's outperforming shooters with decades of experience and equipment worth tens of thousands of dollars. There has to be some explanation. The explanation, though Derek couldn't see it, lay in 25 years of daily practice and an understanding of marksmanship fundamentals that had been drilled into Sarah since childhood. Her grandfather's training had emphasized reading natural conditions, understanding bullet flight, and developing an intuitive feel for her rifle that no amount of technology could replicate. As the morning progressed through additional relays, it became clear that Sarah was not experiencing beginner's luck or benefiting from unusually favorable conditions. She was simply shooting at a level that few competitors could match, regardless of their equipment or experience. The 400-yard results confirmed what many observers had suspected after watching her performance. Sarah had not only advanced to the 500-yard stage, but had done so with the highest cumulative score of any competitor. Derek, despite his technical expertise and sophisticated equipment, found himself ranked 7th overall. During the lunch break, an impromptu gathering developed around Derek's equipment area as competitors tried to understand what they were witnessing. The presence of a relative unknown dominating a field of experienced precision shooters had upset everyone's assumptions about competitive shooting. "I've been competing for 12 years, said Rodriguez from Texas, a former Marine sniper with multiple competition victories. "I've never seen shooting like that from someone with basic equipment. It's like watching someone beat Formula One cars with a stock pickup truck." Derek nodded grimly. "The physics just don't add up. At these distances, equipment precision becomes critical. You can't compensate for scope limitations and barrel inconsistencies with technique alone." Lisa Wong, Maria Santos' shooting partner, offered a different perspective based on her military experience. "Maybe we're overthinking this. In the Marines, we had some guys who could outshoot anyone with basic M40A1 South. They just understood their rifles so well that they could compensate for any limitations. But this is different," Derek insisted. "Competition precision shooting requires consistent sub-OA accuracy at varying distances. You need equipment that can deliver that level of performance repeatedly." Maria Santos, who had been listening to the conversation while preparing her own equipment, finally spoke up. "Derek, you keep talking about equipment limitations, but what if her equipment isn't limited? What if it's just different from what you're used to?" "Maria, I've examined that rifle. It's a standard Remington 700 with a basic scope from the 1990s. The barrel isn't free-floated. The trigger isn't precision-tuned. The stock isn't adjustable. By every measure we use to evaluate precision rifles, it's inadequate for serious competition." "Maybe," Maria replied, "but yesterday and this morning suggest otherwise. Sometimes the most important factor isn't the rifle, but the person behind it." This conversation was overheard by several other competitors, creating an undercurrent of tension that hadn't existed at the beginning of the competition. Derek's frustration was becoming more apparent, and his earlier condescension towards Sarah was evolving into something approaching hostility. "Look," Derek said, raising his voice slightly, "I respect what she's accomplished, but let's be realistic. This is a fluke. At 500 and 600 yards, the laws of physics take over. No amount of natural talent can overcome equipment limitations at extreme distance." His teammates exchanged uncomfortable glances. Derek's usually calm professionalism was cracking under the pressure of being outperformed by someone he had initially dismissed as unqualified. The afternoon session began with preparation for the 500-yard stage, where only 15 competitors would be permitted to continue. The distance represented a significant escalation in difficulty, as even minor environmental factors could cause dramatic misses at that range. Sarah spent the preparation time studying the extended range, noting how wind patterns changed at different distances and elevations. The 500-yard targets were positioned in a natural depression that created its own microclimate, with wind shadows and thermal currents that could dramatically affect bullet flight. Derek's preparation for the 500-yard stage was more elaborate than ever. His team deployed additional weather monitoring equipment and spent considerable time calculating updated ballistic solutions for the increased distance. The pressure of needing to outperform Sarah had intensified their focus to an almost obsessive degree. "Wind velocity is increasing with gusts to 12 miles per hour, Tom reported, reading from multiple instruments. "We're seeing significant vertical variation. The flags at 300 yards are showing different conditions than the ones at 500. Derek studied the complex wind patterns through his spotting scope, trying to develop a strategy for managing the challenging conditions. The mathematics of long-range shooting became exponentially more complex as distance increased, and even small errors in calculation could result in complete misses. "This is where her limitations will finally show," Derek said with grim satisfaction. "At 500 yards in these conditions, you can't just rely on intuition and timing. You need precise data and equipment capable of consistent performance." When the first relay was called to the 500-yard line, Derek took his position with renewed confidence. This was his element, technical precision, shooting where preparation and equipment advantages would finally prove decisive. His first shot at 500 yards was carefully calculated and executed, resulting in a solid hit in the 9 ring. Tom provided immediate feedback on wind conditions and suggested adjustments for subsequent shots. Derek's string progressed methodically, each shot the result of careful calculation and technical precision. However, the challenging conditions proved difficult even for Derek's sophisticated approach. Several of his shots were affected by wind gusts that his instruments had failed to predict, resulting in impacts outside the scoring rings. When his target was retrieved, Derek had posted a respectable but not exceptional score. "Tough conditions out there," Tom offered consolingly. "That wind is really tricky at this distance." Derek nodded, but his attention was focused entirely on the relay assignments, waiting to see how Sarah would handle the same challenging conditions that had affected his performance. When Sarah's relay was called to the 500-yard line, Derek positioned himself directly behind her firing point with his spotting scope. He was determined to document her technique and identify the inevitable flaws that would emerge under extreme pressure. Sarah's approach to the 500-yard challenge appeared unchanged from her previous shooting. She took her position calmly, established her shooting fundamentals, and began studying the wind conditions without the aid of instruments or spotters. "She's taking too long to set up," Derek observed critically. "At this distance, you need to shoot quickly before conditions change." But as Sarah continued her observation period, it became apparent that she was doing more than simply delaying. She was reading the complex wind patterns at multiple distances, understanding how air currents interacted with the terrain to create predictable cycles. When Sarah finally fired her first shot at 500 yards, Derek watched through his spotting scope as the bullet impacted dead center in the 10 ring. His confidence wavered slightly, but he reminded himself that single good shots could happen to anyone. Sarah's second shot followed within 2 minutes, again striking the center of the target. Then a third, equally precise. Derek's growing alarm was evident in his increasingly agitated commentary. "She can't maintain this," Derek muttered. "The conditions are too variable. She has to miss eventually." But Sarah continued building what was clearly going to be another exceptional group. Each shot placed with mechanical precision despite wind conditions that were challenging every other competitor. Her timing and technique remained consistent, demonstrating a level of shooting skill that Derek was struggling to comprehend. By her 8th shot, word had spread throughout the competitor area that something remarkable was happening on the 500-yard line. Shooters who had already completed their strings gathered behind the firing line to observe, while others abandoned their own preparation to watch through spotting scopes. "I've never seen anything like this," whispered Rodriguez from Texas. "She's shooting better at 500 yards than most people shoot at 100. Derek's frustration had evolved into something approaching desperation. Everything he believed about precision shooting was being challenged by a woman with equipment he considered obsolete and technique he had dismissed as unsophisticated. When Sarah fired her final shot at 500 yards, completing another near-perfect group, Derek stood up abruptly from his spotting scope. His face was flushed with frustration, and his usual composure had completely abandoned him. "This is impossible," Derek announced loudly enough for everyone around him to hear. "Nobody shoots groups like that at 500 yards with hunting equipment. There has to be some kind of explanation." Tom Bradley grabbed Derek's arm, trying to calm him down. "Derek, you need to control yourself. She's just having a good day." "A good day?" Derek's voice rose higher. "Tom, she's making shots that would be impressive with any equipment, and she's doing it with a rifle that belongs in a museum. Either she's the greatest natural shooter who ever lived, or something isn't right here." Maria Santos, who had been watching Derek's escalating agitation with growing concern, decided to intervene. "Derek, what exactly are you suggesting?" Derek turned to face the gathering crowd of competitors, his professional facade cracking under pressure. "I'm suggesting that nobody gets this lucky without some kind of advantage we don't know about. Modified ammunition, altered equipment. Something that explains performance that defies everything we know about precision shooting." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot, creating an uncomfortable silence among the assembled competitors. Derek had essentially suggested that Sarah was cheating, a serious allegation in the tight-knit precision shooting community. Sarah, who had been quietly packing her equipment after completing her 500-yard string, looked up at the commotion surrounding Derek's outburst. She had heard enough of his comments to understand that he was questioning the legitimacy of her performance. "Is there a problem?" Sarah asked quietly, approaching the group of competitors. Derek turned toward her, his frustration and confusion boiling over into direct confrontation. "Yes, there's a problem. What you're doing out there isn't possible with the equipment you're using. I've been shooting competitively for 15 years, and I've never seen performance like that from anyone, regardless of their setup." Sarah studied Derek's face, seeing the genuine bewilderment behind his anger. "What would you like to know?" "I want to know how you're making those shots," Derek said bluntly. "With that rifle, that scope, in these conditions, it shouldn't be possible. Either you're doing something we don't know about, or you're getting help somehow." The direct accusation caused several competitors to step back uncomfortably. Beverly Morrison, the competition organizer, had been monitoring the situation and now approached the group with a stern expression. "Is there a formal complaint being made here?" Beverly asked, her tone indicating that she would not tolerate unsupported accusations. Derek hesitated, realizing that he had allowed his frustration to push him toward making allegations he couldn't prove. "I'm not making a formal complaint, but I think we need to understand what's happening here." Sarah set down her rifle case and faced Derek directly. "You want to understand my shooting? Ask me questions, look at my equipment, watch my technique, but don't accuse me of cheating without evidence." Her calm response only seemed to increase Derek's agitation. "Fine, let's start with your ammunition. Hand-loaded rounds can provide significant accuracy advantages over factory ammunition." Sarah reached into her equipment bag and pulled out a box of ammunition, handing it to Derek. "Factory Federal Gold Medal Match, 168 grain Sierra Match King. Bullets. Same lot number for all my rounds. Purchased from Sportsman's Warehouse in Billings 3 weeks ago." Derek examined the ammunition carefully, looking for any signs of modification or special preparation. The cartridges were clearly factory-loaded, with consistent powder charges and bullet seating that showed no evidence of hand-loading. "What about your rifle?" Derek continued. "Any modifications, trigger work, barrel replacement?" Walt Peterson, the equipment inspector, stepped forward. "I've examined that rifle twice now. It's completely stock, no modifications whatsoever. Even the trigger is factory specification." Derek's theory about hidden equipment advantages was rapidly crumbling, but his need to find an explanation continued driving his questions. "Then it has to be technique. Some special breathing method, grip modification, something that gives you an edge." Sarah looked at Derek with what might have been sympathy. "Would you like me to show you my shooting position?" "Yes," Derek said immediately. "I want to see exactly how you're shooting." Sarah retrieved her rifle from its case and assumed her prone shooting position on the ground beside the firing line. Her stance was textbook classic, nothing exotic or unusual that would explain exceptional accuracy. "Straight leg prone," observed Lisa Wong. "Standard military position, nothing fancy about it." Derek studied Sarah's position intently, looking for subtle techniques that might provide accuracy advantages. Her grip, breathing, cheek weld, and trigger control all appeared fundamentally sound, but unremarkable. "Your scope settings," Derek sighed, grasping for any possible explanation. "What elevation and windage adjustments are you using?" Sarah checked her scope turrets. 2 clicks up from my 100-yard zero for the 500-yard distance. No windage adjustment. I hold off for wind instead of dialing." Derek stared at her in disbelief. "You're not even using your scope adjustments? How can you maintain accuracy at varying distances without precise elevation corrections?" "I know where my bullets hit at different distances," Sarah replied simply. "I hold over or under based on what I've learned through practice." This revelation stunned Derek more than anything else Sarah had said. Modern precision shooting methodology relied heavily on precise scope adjustments calculated through ballistic software. The idea of successfully competing at championship level using holdover techniques seemed almost primitive. "That's impossible," Derek said flatly. "At 500 yards, even small errors in holdover result in complete misses. You can't maintain the precision we've seen using estimates and guesswork." Sarah stood up from her demonstration shooting position. "It's not guesswork if you've practiced enough to know exactly where your bullets will hit." Beverly Morrison had been listening to this exchange with growing impatience. As competition organizer, she was responsible for maintaining fairness and preventing disruptions that could affect other competitors. "Derek," Beverly said firmly, "unless you have specific evidence of rule violations, this discussion needs to end. Other competitors are trying to prepare for their shooting, and your accusations are creating a distraction." Derek looked around at the faces watching him, seeing expressions ranging from sympathy to disapproval. He realized that his public questioning of Sarah's legitimacy had backfired. making him appear unsportsmanlike rather than revealing any actual impropriety. "I apologize," Derek said stiffly, addressing Sarah directly. "I shouldn't have questioned your integrity without evidence. Your shooting is just difficult to understand." Sarah nodded acceptance of his apology, but the damage to Derek's reputation among the competitors had been done. His earlier condescension followed by public accusations had painted him as someone who couldn't gracefully accept being outperformed. The 500-yard results were posted shortly after this confrontation, confirming what everyone had observed. Sarah had posted the highest score of the day, significantly ahead of any other competitor. Derek found himself ranked 9th overall, his performance affected by both challenging conditions and the psychological pressure of trying to match Sarah's shooting. Only 8 competitors would advance to the final 600-yard stage, and Derek's ranking left him on the bubble. His teammates Tom and Jack had also struggled with the 500-yard conditions, effectively eliminating the Apex Precision team from contention for the championship. As competitors prepared for the final elimination round that would determine the 8 finalists, Derek found himself isolated from the camaraderie that usually characterized precision shooting competitions. His public confrontation with Sarah had created an uncomfortable atmosphere that other shooters were avoiding. Sarah, meanwhile, continued her quiet preparation routine, seemingly unaffected by the controversy surrounding her performance. She studied the 600-yard range layout, noting how the extreme distance would amplify every environmental factor and equipment limitation. The irony was not lost on several observers that Derek's sophisticated equipment and technical expertise had been outperformed by someone using methods he had initially dismissed as inadequate. The confrontation had highlighted fundamental questions about the relationship between technology and skill in precision shooting. As the afternoon shadows lengthened and competitors prepared for the ultimate test of their abilities, the stage was set for a dramatic conclusion to a competition that had already challenged everyone's assumptions about what was possible in precision marksmanship. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Pine Ridge as the 8 remaining competitors prepared for the ultimate test of precision marksmanship. The 600-yard final would determine not only the championship winner, but also settle the questions that had been brewing throughout the competition about skill versus technology, experience versus natural ability. Sarah Chun stood quietly at the edge of the competitor area, her grandfather's rifle case resting against her leg as she studied the distant targets that would decide her fate. The weight of expectation had shifted dramatically since her arrival. 2 days earlier, what had begun as a personal challenge to help save her family's ranch had evolved into something larger, a statement about the fundamental nature of marksmanship itself. Derek Hawthorne sat on a folding chair beside his elaborate equipment setup, staring at the competitor list with mounting desperation. His name appeared in 8th position, barely qualifying for the finals after his confrontation with Sarah had disrupted his mental game. The realization that he might be eliminated by someone he had initially dismissed as unqualified gnawed at his professional pride and competitive spirit. Beverly Morrison called the finalists together for a briefing on the championship round format. The 8 competitors formed a loose circle around her, their faces reflecting the tension and anticipation that comes with high-stakes competition. Among them were some of the most accomplished precision shooters in the region, each with their own reasons for wanting to claim the Pine Ridge Championship. "Ladies and gentlemen," Beverly began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had managed countless competitions. "You represent the finest precision shooters in the tri-state area. The final round consists of 15 shots at 600 yards, with scoring based on cumulative accuracy. Weather conditions are expected to remain challenging, with variable winds and decreasing light as we move into evening." She paused to let the implications sink in. Shooting at 600 yards, in fading light with unpredictable wind, would test every aspect of their skills and equipment. The competitor with the highest cumulative score wins the championship, the $50,000 prize, and automatic qualification for the Regional Olympic Development Program. Sarah felt her stomach tighten at the mention of the Olympic program. That opportunity represented dreams she had harbored since childhood, but never dared pursue seriously. The ranch and her brother's medical expenses had always taken priority over personal ambitions, but now both goals seemed within reach if she could maintain her performance for one more stage. Derek listened to the briefing with growing anxiety. The Olympic qualification represented years of training and sacrifice, the pinnacle of competitive shooting achievement he'd been pursuing throughout his career. The thought of losing that opportunity to someone with basic equipment and no formal training was almost unbearable. The competitors were given 30 minutes to conduct final equipment checks and mental preparation before taking their positions on the 600-yard firing line. Sarah used this time to walk the length of the range once more, observing how the wind patterns had changed as the day progressed, and shadows altered the thermal dynamics across the shooting area. Derek spent the preparation period obsessively checking his equipment and reviewing ballistic calculations. His teammates Tom and Jack, despite being eliminated from individual competition, remained to provide support and spotting assistance. The Apex Precision team's sophisticated preparation routine had become even more elaborate, as if additional technology and data could compensate for Derek's deteriorating confidence. Atmospheric pressure has dropped 2 points since this morning, Tom reported, reading from multiple weather instruments. Temperature is falling, humidity increasing. We need to adjust elevation by at least 4 clicks and account for increased air density effects. Derek nodded mechanically, making the suggested adjustments to his scope settings. But his attention kept drifting to Sarah, who was conducting her own preparation without instruments, computers, or coaching support. Her simplicity in the face of such a complex challenge seemed almost insulting to Derek's methodical approach. Maria Santos approached Sarah during the preparation period, having watched the day's events with growing admiration for the quiet woman's skill and composure. As a shooting instructor, Maria recognized genuine talent when she saw it, regardless of the package it came in. "How are you feeling about the final stage?" Maria asked, genuinely curious about Sarah's mental state. After the intense scrutiny she had faced, Sarah considered the question carefully. "Nervous," she admitted. "This represents more than just a competition for me. My family needs this prize money, and the Olympic opportunity is something I never thought possible." "What your grandfather taught you has brought you this far," Maria observed. "Trust that training now." Sarah smiled slightly. "He used to say that when the pressure builds, go back to the fundamentals. Breathing, sight picture, trigger control, follow through. Everything else is just noise." Their conversation was interrupted by Derek approaching, his expression a mixture of determination and desperation. The public confrontation earlier had damaged his standing among competitors, but his need to understand Sarah's success continued driving him to seek answers. "I want to make something clear," Derek said, addressing Sarah directly. "I apologize again for questioning your integrity. That was unprofessional and unsportsmanlike." Sarah nodded acknowledgement of his apology. Derek continued, "But I need to understand what I'm seeing out there. I've dedicated my entire adult life to precision shooting. I've studied ballistics, invested in the best equipment available, trained with Olympic coaches. And you're outperforming me with equipment and techniques I was taught were obsolete." "Maybe they're not obsolete," Sarah replied quietly. "Maybe they're just different. But how?" Derek's voice carried genuine anguish. "At 600 yards, even, tiny errors become misses. Wind calls have to be precise, elevation corrections calculated exactly. How can you achieve championship-level accuracy without the tools to measure and calculate those variables?" Sarah looked at Derek with something approaching sympathy. My grandfather spent 2 years in Korea as a sniper. He told me that the enemy doesn't wait for you to consult ballistic tables or check wind meters. You learn to read conditions instinctively, to understand your rifle so well that corrections become automatic. But that was combat shooting, not precision competition, Derek protested. The fundamentals are the same, Sarah said simply. Whether you're hitting a target at 600 yards or 1,000 yards, whether it's for a championship or to save your life, the bullet follows the same laws of physics. The only difference is how well you understand those laws and trust your ability to apply them. Beverly's voice carried across the range, calling competitors to take their positions for the championship final. The moment that would determine. The Pine Ridge champion had arrived, carrying with it the resolution of questions that had been building throughout the competition. The 8 finalists moved to the 600-yard firing line, each carrying the weight of their own expectations and preparation. Sarah took position 7, with Derek assigned to position 3. The spacing allowed each shooter adequate room for their equipment while maintaining the competitive atmosphere of shooting alongside their rivals. Derek's setup process was elaborate and time-consuming. His custom rifle required precise positioning on its bipod and rear support bag. His ballistic computer provided updated firing solutions based on current atmospheric conditions. Tom positioned himself as a spotter, ready to call wind conditions and impact locations throughout Derek's string of fire. Sarah's preparation was markedly different. She spread her simple shooting mat, positioned her rifle with its basic sling configuration, and spent several minutes establishing her natural point of aim. No computers, no spotters, no elaborate support equipment, just a shooter, her rifle, and decades of accumulated experience. The rangemaster's voice carried clearly across the firing line as competitors made final adjustments. Finalists, you have 20 minutes to complete 15 shots at 600 yards. You may begin firing when ready. Derek chambered his first round with trembling hands, the pressure of the moment combining with his deteriorating confidence to affect his normally steady technique. Through his precision scope, the target appeared distant and small, its scoring rings barely visible in the fading afternoon light. Wind is 6 miles per hour from northwest, Tom called from his spotting position. Your ballistic solution shows 4.2 mils elevation, 0.8 mils left for wind. Derek made the calculated adjustments and settled into his shooting position. His first shot broke after what seemed like an eternity of aiming, the result of overthinking and second-guessing that had replaced his usual decisive technique. Hit 9 ring at 4 o'clock, Tom called immediately. Adjust elevation up 0.2 mils. The miss from the 10 ring sent a jolt of panic through Derek's system. He made the suggested correction and fired again, this shot impacting closer to center but still not achieving the precision he needed to win. Sarah's approach to the 600-yard final was consistent with her performance throughout the competition. She chambered her first round calmly, settled into her shooting position, and began reading the wind conditions without assistance from instruments or spotters. The distant target wavered slightly in her scope as heat mirage created visual distortions. But Sarah had learned to read these effects as additional information about atmospheric conditions. Her grandfather had taught her to use mirage patterns to understand wind direction and velocity at different distances. When Sarah fired her first shot at 600 yards, spectators watched through spotting scopes as the bullet impacted dead center. In the 10 ring, the shot was perfectly placed, demonstrating the same precision that had characterized her shooting throughout the competition. Derek heard the distinctive crack of Sarah's rifle and instinctively knew the shot had been successful. The knowledge that she was maintaining her exceptional performance, while his own shooting deteriorated, only increased his mental pressure. Focus on your own shooting, Tom urged, recognizing the signs of Derek's psychological struggle. Don't worry about what anyone else is doing. But Derek couldn't ignore the growing murmur from spectators who were watching Sarah build another exceptional group. His third shot missed the scoring rings entirely, a wild miss that eliminated any realistic chance of winning the championship. "Derek, you need to get control of yourself," Tom said urgently. "Remember your fundamentals. Breathing, trigger control, follow through." Derek tried to implement Tom's advice, but his confidence was shattered. Everything he had believed about precision shooting was being challenged by Sarah's continued success with methods he had dismissed as primitive. Each of her shots seemed to mock his sophisticated equipment and technical approach. Sarah continued through her string methodically, each shot the result of careful observation and instinctive adjustment rather than calculated precision. Her technique appeared almost meditative, a rhythm of observation, decision, and execution that flowed naturally from years of practice. By her 10th shot, Sarah had built a group that would have been impressive at any distance, much less 600 yards in challenging conditions. Word spread among spectators that they were witnessing something extraordinary, a performance that would be remembered long after the competition ended. Derek struggled to complete his 15-shot string, each successive shot affected by mounting frustration and psychological pressure. What should have been his moment of triumph was becoming a public demonstration of how mental state could override technical preparation and equipment advantages. Other finalists were experiencing their own challenges with the demanding conditions. Rodriguez from Texas posted a respectable score despite struggling with wind calls. Maria Santos shot consistently but couldn't match the exceptional precision that Sarah was demonstrating. As the championship round progressed, it became clear that Sarah was not simply winning the competition, but dominating it in a way that redefined expectations about precision shooting. Her performance suggested that fundamental marksmanship skills, properly developed and applied, could overcome supposed equipment limitations. When Sarah fired her 15th and final shot, completing her string with the same precision that had characterized every previous shot, the range fell silent. Spectators and competitors alike understood they had witnessed something special, a performance that challenged basic assumptions about competitive shooting. Derek fired his final shot with resignation rather than hope. His string had been a disaster by his own standards, affected by psychological pressure and the realization that his approach to precision shooting might be fundamentally flawed. The scoring process took nearly 30 minutes as judges carefully measured and verified each target. The results would determine not only the championship winner, but also validate or challenge everything the precision shooting community believed about equipment, technique, and training. When the final scores were posted, Sarah's name appeared at the top with a margin of victory that stunned everyone present. Her 15-shot group at 600 yards measured smaller than most competitors achieved at half that distance. Derek's name appeared 7th in the final standings, a humbling result that forced him to confront the limitations of his approach. Beverly Morrison took the microphone to announce the official results and present awards to the top finishers. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's Pine Ridge Precision Shooting Championship has been won by Sarah Chen of Montana, shooting a 15-shot group measuring 4.2 inches at 600 yards. The announcement generated sustained applause from spectators who recognized the exceptional nature of Sarah's performance. The group size would have been impressive for any rifle and shooter combination, but achieving it with basic equipment elevated the accomplishment to legendary status. Sarah accepted the championship trophy with quiet dignity, the weight of the moment overwhelming her natural reserve. The $50,000 prize would save her family's ranch and provide for her brother's medical treatment. The Olympic qualification represented opportunities she had never dared imagine possible. Derek watched the awards ceremony with mixed emotions. His competitive disappointment was tempered by grudging admiration for Sarah's achievement and recognition. that he had witnessed something that would change his understanding of precision shooting forever. In her brief acceptance speech, Sarah thanked her grandfather for his patient teaching and dedication to fundamentals. He always said that fancy equipment might make shooting easier, but it doesn't make you a better shooter. Today proved that the most important tool is the one between your ears. The statement resonated throughout the precision shooting community, sparking discussions about the balance between technology and skill that would continue long after the Pine Ridge competition ended. Following the award ceremony, Derek approached Sarah one final time. His earlier antagonism had been replaced by genuine respect and curiosity about her approach to marksmanship. "I need to understand what happened here," Derek said honestly. "Everything I thought I knew about precision shooting has been challenged by your performance." Sarah studied Derek's face, seeing genuine humility replacing his earlier arrogance. "What would you like to know? How did you develop this level of skill? What training methods did you use? How do you read conditions without instruments?" Sarah smiled slightly. "My grandfather started teaching me when I was 8 years old. Every day for 10 years, we practiced together. He taught me to observe everything, how grass moves in different winds, how mirage patterns change with temperature, how bullet impact sounds different in various conditions." "But surely there's more to it than observation," Derek pressed. "There is," Sarah agreed. "Thousands of hours of practice with the same rifle, shooting in every possible condition. Learning exactly where bullets will hit at every distance, in every wind condition, in every type of weather. Building muscle memory so complete that correct technique becomes automatic." Derek nodded slowly, beginning to understand the depth of preparation that Sarah's simple approach actually represented. "So it's not that you don't use technology. You've become the technology." "Something like that," Sarah replied. "My grandfather used to say that the rifle is just a tool. The real precision instrument is the shooter who understands how to use it." As competitors packed their equipment and prepared to leave Pine Ridge, the impact of Sarah's victory was already spreading through social media and shooting forums. Videos of her technique and stories of her equipment sparked debates about fundamentals versus technology that would influence precision shooting training for years to come. Derek spent considerable time that evening reviewing video footage of Sarah's shooting technique, trying to identify subtle elements he had missed during his initial observations. What he discovered was that her apparent simplicity masked sophisticated understanding of marksmanship fundamentals that exceeded his own despite years of formal training. The drive home to Montana gave Sarah time to process the magnitude of what had occurred at Pine Ridge. The championship victory represented more than financial relief for her family. It validated an approach to shooting that honored her grandfather's memory and preserved traditional marksmanship skills. 3 weeks after the competition, Sarah received an invitation to the Olympic Training Center for evaluation and potential inclusion in the National Development Program. The opportunity represented a complete transformation of her life's trajectory, from struggling ranch hand to potential Olympic athlete. Derek's experience at Pine Ridge forced a fundamental reevaluation of his approach to precision shooting. He began incorporating observation training and fundamental skill development into his routine, recognizing that technological advantages meant nothing without the underlying ability to apply them effectively. The story of Sarah's victory spread throughout the precision shooting community, inspiring a renewed focus on marksmanship fundamentals and raising questions about over-reliance on equipment. Shooting schools began incorporating traditional observation and reading skills into their curricula, recognizing the value of developing shooters rather than just equipment operators. 6 months later, Sarah was selected for the National Olympic Development Team, beginning a journey that would take her from rural Montana to international competition. Her success story became legendary in shooting circles, proof that dedication to fundamentals and respect for traditional skills could overcome any supposed disadvantage. Derek eventually became one of Sarah's most vocal supporters, using his platform in the shooting community to advocate for balanced training that emphasized both technical knowledge and fundamental skills. His transformation from skeptic to advocate helped legitimize Sarah's approach among traditionalists who had initially dismissed her methods. The Pine Ridge competition became a turning point in precision shooting culture, demonstrating that innovation didn't always require new technology, but sometimes meant returning to proven fundamentals that had been overlooked in the pursuit of technical sophistication. Sarah's grandfather's old Remington 700 was eventually displayed in the Pine Ridge Pro Shop, not as a museum piece, but as a reminder that exceptional performance comes from the skill of the shooter, not the sophistication of the equipment. The simple rifle that had been dismissed as obsolete became a symbol of what was possible when tradition met dedication. Years later, when asked about the secret to her success, Sarah would always return to her grandfather's fundamental lesson: respect the basics, understand your equipment completely, and never stop learning from every shot. The message resonated far beyond competitive shooting, inspiring anyone who had ever been underestimated because their methods didn't match conventional expectations. The quiet woman who had been shamed for holding her rifle wrong had not only hit the bullseye 10 times straight, but had fundamentally changed how an entire community understood the relationship between skill and technology. Her legacy lived on in every shooter who chose to master fundamentals rather than simply acquire more sophisticated equipment. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.